The sons of Korax are preparing to jump out of the shadows once more, and they've got an unbelievable amount of sneaky tricks up their armoured sleeves in this new Raven Guard Codex. So welcome back to Auspex Tactics. We're continuing our look at the supplement books for the new Codex Space Marines, and here today we're talking about the Raven Guard. The Raven Guard are the successors of the 14th Legion, hailing from their homeworld of Deliverance, and are famed for their stealth tactics and striking with surgical precision into the heart of the enemy ranks. I'll be honest, I initially wasn't too excited when I saw the Raven Guard's unique doctrine and their chapter traits, but they've really grown on me. Since I've found out about the contents of this book, I realised that the Codex is far stronger in its stratagems and warlord traits than some of the rest. There are some absolutely brutal tricks that can have your Raven Guard cut deep into the enemy lines very early in the game, and of course they're absolutely brutal at taking out enemy characters. In this review we're going to go over every new rule in this book very quickly, except for the rules for Kavan Shrike, which I've already made a video on. The book contains psychic powers, relics, warlord traits and stratagems for augmenting your Space Marine armies. So let's dive right on into it. The Raven Guard's chapter tactic is Shadow Masters, so when resolving an attack made by a ranged weapon against a unit with this tactic, if the enemy model is more than 12 inches away, then it counts as always being in cover. Furthermore, if the unit is not a vehicle and is entirely on or within a terrain feature, then you can subtract 1 from the hit roll too. This makes Raven Guard infantry units, such as Devastators and things that are lurking a long way from the enemy, very hard to hit with conventional weapons. Funnily enough, the boost to cover saves is exceptionally good on vehicles, because they don't usually get cover saves very easily, because it is hard to keep them at least 50% obscured and in a terrain feature. And having a +1 saving throw on a large vehicle with toughness 7 or more and loads of wounds on a 3-up save makes them very hard to shift indeed. So right from the start we can see that Raven Guard excel at being a gunline army that operates greater than 12 inches away from the enemy, because when they get closer than that, they lose all benefits from their chapter tactic. Next we have their augmented doctrine. So their doctrine is surgical strikes. This augments their tactical doctrine, and you get this if your entire army is pure Raven Guard or a pure Raven Guard successor chapter. And this rule is powerful but situational. While the tactical doctrine is active when resolving an attack made by a model with this ability against a character unit, you can add 1 to the hit and wound rolls. So obviously this is a massive buff against killing characters, but against the entire rest of the enemy army it's not going to do anything at all. For example, when firing a unit of eliminators at a character, this acts as basically a 50% damage buff when they're using mortis rounds, and it's even better on sniper scout squads. The only irritating thing about this doctrine is that it has to be in the tactical doctrine, which basically means that you're not going to get the surgical strikes benefit on turn 1. And also a lot of the things that are going to be targeting characters are going to be heavy weapons such as sniper rifles or eliminator bolt sniper rifles, that kind of thing. So ideally they want to be in the Devastator doctrine anyway if they can. Personally I think that this is a weaker buff than the Iron Hands super doctrine, mainly because it doesn't start until turn 2 when you're in the tactical doctrine, but it does have some good niche uses. There are some really tough character models that are actually vehicles or monsters, such as say Imperial Knights are often characters if you give them a relic or a warlord trait, Chaos Lord Discordants, Astra Militarum tank commanders, Demon Primarchs such as Magnus or Mortarion, Demon Princes if they expose themselves from their screen when they go and kill something. There's quite a decent list of things that are characters that your heavy weapons can just shoot at normally anyway, and having this buff in effect is a really powerful boost against killing them. Whenever you're going from a 3-up hit roll and a 3-up wound roll to a 2-up hit roll and 2-up wound roll, then that's essentially a 50% boost in damage. So you can see this as for every 2 las cannons that you would fire at a knight. When this surgical strikes doctrine is in effect, it's the equivalent of firing 3 las cannons at them. And obviously you can buff that further with, say, captain and lieutenant rerolls. But obviously eliminators and sniper scouts and the like are where this really shines. If you have access to this rule in your army, then I would say that 3 squads of eliminators are an auto-include and should be always fielded if you have them available. It also makes sniper scouts a very reasonable choice in filling out a battalion. and I wouldn't tend to use these guys as much normally if it weren't for this particularly boosted Doctrine. So let's move on with the rest of the book. The 1 unit datasheet in this book is Primaris Kayvan Shrike, and I won't cover him in too much detail here because I've already done a full video review of him. He's a good tactically flexible option. He will give you full Chapter Master rerolls, buff your jump units to have reroll charges, and he's quite a nasty close combat monster in himself, with a 14-inch move and damage to lightning claws that hit you a million times and reroll wounds. I'll put a link down in my comments to my full review of him, but if you are playing Raven Guard, he is certainly worth considering for 130 points. Moving on, I think we'll cover the Warlord traits first. The first is Shadow Master. This is the one that Shrike gets. Basically, this prevents Overwatch from being fired at your Warlord. It's quite simple. It would have been nice to see it combined with another buff as well, but frankly, being able to ignore Overwatch is a ridiculously powerful ability. If you're, say, playing Tau, then it means that you can just charge their massive castle with loads and loads of Overwatch and overlapping fields of fire, and tie up the units that you need so the rest of your army can charge. It's great on Blood Angel Smash Captains, and it will be great on Shrike or another Raven Guard Smash Captain. The only negative is that if your character is going to be charging into the heart of the enemy, it might make it easy to kill if it is your Warlord, so I might buy this in through the Hero of the Chapter stratagem, which lets you put a Warlord trait on a model that isn't your Warlord. Next we have Master of Ambush, and this is the good one. This is really strong. Basically, at the start of the battle round before the first turn, after the Seize the Initiative roll, but before the start of the first turn, you can redeploy this character and 1 Raven Guard infantry unit on the battlefield to wherever you like, provided it is 9 inches away from enemy models or the enemy deployment zone. Now this is absolutely insane. It's strongest on units that are really slow and have a lot of damage output, but if they're close to the enemy can really mess them up. My 2 best choices for this are either Assault Centurions or Aggressors. Because it happens at the start of the first battle round, you can react perfectly to how your opponent has deployed. It is very powerful if you're going first, because you'll essentially put down a unit and you'll have the option to either just sit there and shoot, or move, shoot and assault, right into the enemy deployment zone turn 1, no questions asked. As they're deploying within 9 inches of the deployment zone or enemy models, it's likely that your aggressors will be able to just sit there and double tap, so that's around about 110 shots straight away, turn 1. But my personal pick for the unit to choose is Assault Centurions. These things are tankier than aggressors, they have almost as many shots, they have horrendous flamers if you get very close to them, and they also have much better close combat than the aggressors with their flat damage 3 siege drills. You could run the character as a Chapter Master or maybe a Chaplain with the +1 to wound liturgy, and just go to town on the enemy. They should probably be able to get into flamer range, so that's essentially around 42 auto-hitting strength 4 shots, an extra 72 bolter shots potentially with rerolls if you bought the character for that, and then charging in and potentially fighting twice if you pay 3 CP. These things will kill pretty well anything in close combat with how many high strength, high damage attacks they have. The best way to defend against this is to have units that set up outside your own deployment zone, such as your own scouts, or Invicta tactical warsuits, or infiltrators, or incursors. I've just made a couple of videos on the infiltrators and incursors, so feel free to check those out if you want to know a few more of the rules about those guys. You also have the option of making the character into a Smash Captain. Say if you brought a jump pack captain with a Thunderhammer and Storm Shield, he'd be able to jump in 12 inches, make a very long charge, potentially over some screens, and hit a nasty enemy heavy in the backfield first turn. Obviously this is mainly a massive buff if you're going first, but you could still use it cleverly to set up, say, your unit of aggressors or assault centurions out of line of sight somewhere in the midfield, ready to spring out turn 1 and unleash hell. So I'll stop rabbiting on about this now, but this is honestly my favourite thing in the whole Codex, and it's one of the things that is putting Raven Guard on my competitive radar on the same level as Iron Hands, who are very strong indeed. Next we have Swift and Deadly, where Raven Guard units within 6 inches of this Warlord can charge even if they advance this turn. This again is a very useful Warlord trait, and lets you get massive more mobility over otherwise slower units by putting them in range for charges and then using their charge to get them further up the board. This works on the character himself and on friendly Raven Guard units within 6 inches of him. Next is Master of Vigilance. When your Warlord fights with a melee weapon, any hit rolls of 6 gain 1 mortal wound in addition to their normal damage, which gives them a bunch of extra attacks, but I'm not sure I'd rate it higher than, say, the Imperium Sword from the main Marines book. The next is Feigned Flight. Your Warlord can shoot and charge after falling back. It's not terrible, but I think it's a bit situational, and your Warlord might not necessarily live to fall back. Likely the enemy might just fall back from a tooled up combat character and shoot him to death with guns. And finally we have Echo of the Ravenspire. This allows your Warlords to go into reserve in your movement phase, come back in the next movement phase more than 9 inches away from enemy models, so essentially a free teleport across the board. I don't think it's terrible, but I think there's stronger Warlord traits out there, and you could always just put him into Deep Strike with a Stratagem in games that you want to. We'll get onto that Stratagem later. Now we'll move on to Relics of the Ravenspire. We'll start with the ones that are mainly only accessible to the Raven Guard themselves, the ones that successor chapters have to pay an additional CP to unlock one of these. Firstly we have the Ebon Claws. These are Lightning Claws with Strength User, AP -3, D3 damage, and give you +1 attack and the standard reroll fail wound rolls of Lightning Claws. They're not too bad, but if you really want a nice fluffy Raven Guard character with Lightning Claws, I'd probably just take Shrike. Secondly is Armour of Shadows. This will ignore AP -1 attacks, so AP -1 becomes AP 0 instead, and in addition an unmodified hit roll of 1, 2 or 3 always fails. It's not a bad little upgrade on survivability, but I'm not convinced how strong it would be in comparison to some of the other book relics. Moving on we have the Raven Skull of Korvad, and this allows you to once per turn reroll 1 hit roll, 1 wound roll or 1 damage roll. When the relic bearer is killed, you'll get +1 to hit rolls against the unit that killed it with all of the Raven Guard units in your army. But the second part is a little bit situational. First, you have to actually get your character killed, which isn't usually a very good idea in the first place. I could see it maybe being used on a suicide smash captain, but I think I'd probably take just something to buff his damage potential. Next we have Raven's Fury, which is an upgraded jump pack. This will allow you to charge after advancing and reroll failed charge rolls. As a small addition, when you make a successful charge on a 4-up, it inflicts 1 mortal wound. I could see this having potential on smash captains that start off the board or even advancing up the board, just to get them where they need to go to, and that reroll charges makes them a bit more reliable at connecting with the enemy. And finally we have Ex Tenebris. This is a mastercrafted Stalker bolt rifle that can also replace an Oculus bolt rifle or Instigator bolt carbine. Its profile is range 36 inches, assault 3, strength 4, AP -2, 2 damage, and it can target characters. It adds +1 to the bearer's hit roll, and it can also ignore cover. I'm usually not that great a fan of the boosted rifles, but this one is actually really good. Its damage profile is far better than most of the other boosted rifles, and also adding +1 to hit and ignoring cover and targeting characters just makes it an actually really good choice. I'd happily throw this either on a backfield buffing character or on, say, an Eliminator Sergeant, just for a little bit of extra firepower. If it gets to hit characters, then great, as the Raven Guard's Super Doctrine will make this absolutely brutal at killing them. And finally we have Oppressor's End. This replaces a combat knife, so you could take it on that new Reaver Lieutenant that has just come out. It has +1 strength, AP -2, 1 damage and +1 attack, but against characters the damage gets increased to 3, so this makes it a really specialist tool, great at killing characters, not too bad at killing a little bit of light infantry, but mainly characters are what you want to be going for if you can get to them. I don't think I'd ever take this myself, just because I feel that putting it on a 6-inch movement model means that you're only ever really likely to get to enemy characters if your opponent brings them to you. So if he's really scared of this knife, then he won't be putting his characters anywhere near charge range of this model. Moving on to the special issue war gear, you can get the Adamantine Mantle, Artificer Armour, Mastercrafted Weapon, and digital weapons that you can get in all of the other Marine successor books. The Adamantine Mantle gives you a 5+ Feel No Pain. Artificer Armor gives you a 2-up and 5+ Invulnerable save. Digital Weapons does an extra attack that might generate a mortal wound, and Mastercrafted Weapon gives you +1 damage. I feel that the Mastercrafted Weapon, say on a Thunder Hammer or Power Fist, the Artificer Armor on, say, a Librarian, and the Adamantine Mantle on a tooled up fighty Smash Captain are all potentially reasonable picks. The Raven Guard special ones include the Shadow Master Cloak, which gives a 3-up invulnerable save, while they're wholly on a terrain feature. I'd only bother taking this if you can't pick up a Storm Shield for the character, and it could be useful, say, for that Master of Ambush Warlord that you want starting further up the board to make them a little bit more tanky. Next we have the Silentus Bolt Pistol. It's a 12-inch pistol 2, strength 5, AP -2, 2 damage that gives +1 to hit rolls and can target characters even if they're not the closest unit. It's not too bad, but at 12-inch range you're rarely going to be shooting it, and I'd be surprised if you get to fire it more than once or twice in a battle. Then we have the Corvidari Bolt. This adds 6 inches to the range of any character's bolt weapon, but it can only fire 1 shot, but it can target units that aren't in line of sight of the bearer. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of this. I don't know why you'd ever take it if Ex Tenebris exists, and most bolt weapons have additional shots anyway, so it's sort of a nerf on a lot of decent bolt weapons. And finally we have Shard of Istvan. This gives +1 attack to the bearer, and leadership tests within 6 inches are automatically passed. Most of the time Space Marines don't have an issue with morale tests, so I wouldn't bother to pay an extra CP for this relic. And if you wanted to boost combat potential, then I'd probably just pick up a Mastercrafted Weapon or something like that instead. So all in all, I think Ex Tenebris is the best relic, though it is only available on certain units, and if you're not planning on using those units, I'm not necessarily sure I would actually specifically buy them in specifically to use that relic. The Relic Jump Pack is the other one that I might see used on a Raven Guard Smash Captain to get them where they need to go. Now let's take a look at the Umbrancy discipline. The word means relating to shadows, just in case anyone's interested. Firstly we have Umbral Form, which is a Warp Charge 5 psychic power. This gives the Psyker a 4+ invulnerable save. Utterly rubbish for a number of reasons, I wouldn't ever bother with this. Next we have Enveloping Darkness on Warp Charge 7. One visible enemy unit within 18 inches cannot fire Overwatch and subtracts 1 from their hit rolls until the start of the next psychic phase. This on the other hand is absolutely fantastic. It's great to put on any big scary unit, say if you've got a Night Crusader wandering up the field, shooting everything with its guns. It means that you can get your nasty close combat units in it without taking heavy casualties, and also if it does survive, then it won't be hitting you anywhere near as well in the next shooting phase. This stacks particularly well with the Raven Guard chapter tactic, because it might be hitting on 2-ups against your infantry and cover on the other side of the board if it needs to shoot them. Next we have Spectral Blade for a Warp Charge 5. This makes your Librarian strike with a strength equal to that of his leadership, which is strength 9, and if the enemy has a lower leadership than he does, then his attacks are resolved at AP -4 as well. Now that's not too bad for a surprising boost to close combat ability for a Librarian, but Librarians don't tend to do quite as well at the whole close combat things as Captains anyway, so I'm not sure if I'd build for this, but it could be useful to have your Librarian counterattack when the enemy reaches your lines. Next we have Shadow Step, so this is Warp Charge 7, and this is another really fun one. Basically it's the equivalent of Da Jump for Space Marines, so it effectively teleports one Raven Guard unit within 18 inches of the Psyker to any point on the battlefield that is outside 9 inches of enemy models. Just to clarify, that's any character unit, not any infantry unit, sorry. This could be a great tool for delivering a tooled up Smash Captain to the enemy's lines, or say moving a Chaplain across the board to support some deep strikers, as this would allow the Chaplain to be on the board to cast his litany at the start of the battle round. Next we have the Abyss, which is a targeted smite power. It's Warp Charge 6, select any visible unit within 18 inches, so it could target a character. Roll 3d6, and for each roll of 4 up, the target takes a mortal wound. So not bad. 1 or 2 mortal wounds on the unit, and if they do suffer any mortal wounds, then the unit suffers a -1 penalty to their leadership for the rest of the turn, which is a bit meh, but nice to have, I guess. And finally we have the Darkness Within. Warp Charge 6, select up to 3 enemy units within 18 inches, Roll 1d6 for each unit. On a 4 up they take a mortal wound, and if you rolled a 10 or higher, you can add 1 to the 1d6 rolls. I wouldn't bother with this one. The Abyss is just better, and frankly so is Smite. Now let's move on to the stratagems, and there are a lot of really strong options here. You're going to want a fair few command points to play with when you're playing as Raven Guard. I'd advise at least shelling out for 2 battalions. Firstly, we have Infiltrators. This is a similar one to the previous Raven Guard stratagem that they had in the old Codex. Basically, for 1 CP, you can move a Raven Guard infantry squad before the battle round begins at the start of the first battle round. The unit must finish at least 9 inches away from enemy models, but because it's before the start of the battle round, you can advance and have no penalty later in the turn. So if you're going first, you could say take your jump pack assault squad, move them 12 in advance, so maybe an extra 15 inches, and then at the start of your first turn, you're happy to move them again and then charge. So this could very easily set up first turn charges. This is even more silly when you combine it with things like that Warlord trait that lets you advance and charge, or playing it on the unit that you used Master of Ambush on. So say if you were using Assault Centurions or Aggressors, then you could get them literally right up to within 9 inches of the enemy units in their deployment zone. Even if the enemy didn't deploy right on the line in their deployment zone, Master of Ambush would let you put models down to within 9 inches of the deployment zone, and then this would let you move in advance. So say on Aggressors that would be another 7 or 8 inches worth of movement, and that should get you right within rapid fire bolt range and probably ready to charge first turn as well. And that's just for 1 CP, so it's brilliant, mainly a move if you go first again, but not bad at all. Raven Guard have some of the best ability for alpha striking and killing an enormous amount of the opponent's army turn 1 if they go first. Next we have Strike from the Shadows. This lets you put 1 Raven Guard infantry unit in ambush, so allowing them to deep strike later in the game. Again, this is amazing on things like Aggressors and Assault Centurions, which until now haven't had the option to essentially teleport in. So for 1 CP per unit, you could drop, say, 1 or 2 units of very nasty close range fire support units and just have them pop up from the shadows later in the game. I would do this with my new favourite Assault Centurion squad if I wasn't going first, to have them just crop up on turn 2 outside of 9 inches of one of the enemy units and unleash 72 bolter shots on them. This can also be useful on other marine units that you want to keep protected, such as Hellblasters, whose main problem is being very squishy for their points. So this stratagem should guarantee them at least 1 turn of 4 effective plasma fire in rapid fire range before they get killed. It could even be perfectly reasonable for backfield heavy weapon units that you don't want to get killed turn 1 before they shoot, such as say Devastator Centurions. You just keep them off the board for 1 CP, they turn up turn 2 and unleash all of their heavy weapons on the enemy then, having taken no casualties whatsoever. So there's an enormous amount of play for this one. Next is Strike from the Skies. At the start of the charge phase, 1 Raven Guard jump pack unit can add 1 to their charge rolls, and they can charge even if they've advanced. This could be good on, say, that Vanguard veteran unit that I was talking about, moving turn 1 with the Infiltrator stratagem, then moving, advancing and also charging as well. It could also be good with units coming on from Deep Strike, say if you drop them within Shrike's aura of reroll to charge. This will let them get an extra +1, so you'd have an 8-inch rerollable charge, which isn't too bad. Next we have the Raven's Blade, 1 CP again, allows you to reroll the charge rolls against 1 enemy unit, but you can only declare on that unit if you want to get this benefit. Again, this could be a great on these units that are coming in from Deep Strike, such as Assault Centurions or Aggressors, and it could be very good on jump pack units coming in from Deep Strike as well, say if they don't have Shrikes or a buff about. Next we have Force Flight. This is 2 CP, so a unit that has been in combat can then fall back, shoot and charge normally, so essentially lets them fight like White Scars and Ultramarines, all in 1-for-1 stratagem. If you've managed to make some sort of clever play, and your assault unit is coming from Deep Strike, charged, and then wrapped a model so the enemy couldn't fall back, then now your unit will have free rein to jump out of that combat, shoot whatever the hell it likes, and then charge another nasty unit, hopefully killing that too. Hopefully I'm not labouring the point too much, but again this fits in really well with the Vanguard Veteran Rush or Assault Centurion strategy, because particularly with units like Aggressors or Assault Centurions, getting all those extra bolter shots when you even were in combat the round before is a horrendously good bonus. Next we have Lay Low the Tyrants. For 1 CP, you can add +1 to wound rolls in the fight phase against a character that has 4 wounds or more and is not a vehicle. So if your characters are dueling other characters, or you catch an enemy nasty character in close combat, you get another really nasty buff towards taking them out. If you stack that with the Tactical Doctrine, then any given unit will have +1 to hit and +2 to wound when fighting the character in close combat. That could be a very nice option, particularly when fighting something scary such as a Demon Prince, when suddenly your normal intercessors will be wounding it on 3s rather than 5s. Next is Vengeance for Istvan 5. 1 CP, a Raven Guard unit can reroll all attack rolls in melee when fighting against a Wordbearer, Iron Warrior, Alpha Legion or Night Guard unit. Like the Iron Hands, the Raven Guard are also very annoyed about the Istvan 5 drop site massacre, but a buff against some of the legions from the Chaos Space Marine Codex isn't really that strong because you won't be encountering them in most games. And now there's Ambushing Fire, 2 CP. At the start of your turn, all Raven Guard units improve their AP by 1 on an unmodified wound roll of 6 when you're firing rapid fire or assault weapons. That stacks with the Tactical Doctrine buff, so on any roll of 6, all of your standard bolters will be getting AP -2, and say bolt rifles will be getting AP -3. Again, this is just amazing on Aggressors and Assault Centurions, as getting extra AP on that is even more valuable and can help their anti-horde weapons clear out elite infantry quite well as well. You can only use this stratagem once per battle, and I would use it turn 2 when you're dropping in some nasty bolter weapons from Strike from the Shadows. Next we have Force Their Hand, and for 1 CP, that you can activate when a Raven Guard infantry squad is in control of one of the objectives in your opponent's deployment zone. Basically this only applies in Maelstrom games, and you can choose one of your opponent's tactical objectives, get them to discard it, and draw a new one. Now obviously this only applies in Maelstrom games, but if you can set it up, then it is worth using just to stop your opponent from scoring quite as many victory points. Could be very nasty if they're just about to score, say, a defend objective for 2 victory points and you snatch that off them. Moving on, we have Stranglehold. This is 2 CP. It can be used before the start of the game if you have any scouts or Phobos units in your army. Each time the opponent spends a CP on a stratagem, on a 5-up you must spend an additional CP, or that stratagem has no effect. It only applies during the first battle round, so I think it's a bit of a give and take. You'd have to spend 2 of your own CP to make your opponent have the potential to spend some CP, and I think that on the whole it's probably not worth doing unless you think that your opponent has some crazy powerful stratagems that they need to use turn 1 only. I'm kind of the opinion that Raven Guard have so many good stratagems themselves, they won't want to burn through their own CP purely to deny their opponent options. The next is See But Remain Unseen. For 1 CP, at the end of your turn, you select a Raven Guard unit from your army that didn't make any attacks during your turn, and until the start of your next turn, the opponent's attacks all suffer a -1 to hit penalty against that unit. As it seems with almost all buffs, this could be great if you're on a big tanky threatening unit in the middle of the board, if for whatever reason they were out of range to use their weapons or to make a charge in their turn. It's also particularly good, say, if you have a Vanguard Veteran squad or a nasty CC threat that failed their charge and didn't get to attack because of that. It will really make it hard for the opponent to shift that unit before their next turn, particularly if you give them some storm shields or things. Next we have Decapitating Blow. So if you kill the enemy Warlord for 2 CP, the entire rest of the army will gain -1 leadership. I don't think that this is going to be worth it in most cases, because to make those 2 CP worth it, the enemy is really going to have to fail a bunch of leadership tests and lose a lot of models to this stratagem. I just don't really see that happening against almost all opponents. Next we have a Deadly Price. You can use this at the end of your turn if you have a Raven Guard infantry or biker unit on an objective. The next time an enemy unit moves within 3 inches of that objective, on a 2+, it suffers D3 mortal wounds, but on a 5+, it suffers a flat 3 mortal wounds. This could combine hilariously with the Incursor's Haywire Mine, meaning that if the enemy wants to try and take an objective, then it could happily suffer 2d3 mortal wounds, with the potential for more if it's either a vehicle or if you get a bit lucky and roll a 5+ on this roll. I'd be tempted to use this if the enemy doesn't have very many horde type units, if they're say all knights or all very elite infantry that you would happily pay 1 CP to do d3 mortal wounds to. If it does deter the enemy from taking an objective that they otherwise needed, then so much the better. And finally we have the 3 stratagems that all successor chapters seem to get. There's one called Masters of the Trifold Path, which gives a non-named character the option to take a second Warlord trait. This is particularly interesting if you're using Master of Ambush. It means you could give them something else very useful and have a really useful buff or a boost to the character's close combat effectiveness start right up the board. You can have Favoured of the Ravenspire, which allows a sergeant to take one of the lesser relics, which I'd certainly consider giving someone Ex Tenebris, the awesome Stalker bolt rifle. And finally there's Token of the Brotherhood, which allows one of the successor chapters to take one of the main Raven Guard relics. Now let's see what we can do with all of this nastiness in one army list. This list is just a draft trying out some of the major themes and powers that I think are very good in a competitive setting. Firstly, let's start with Kavan Shrike himself. He's a great counter-attack character, gives you full rerolls to hit, and can give you reroll charges on himself and all jump units. We'll then take a captain with Thunderhammer and Storm Shield. We'll upgrade him to be a chapter master, and we'll give him the Master of Ambush trait to take him and a unit of horrible assault centurions with hurricanes and flamers, and get ready for that appallingly strong Alpha Strike turn 1. If we don't get first turn, we can always put the assault centurions in Deep Strike reserve, with the Strike from the Shadows stratagem for 1 CP. We also have a unit of 6 aggressors with Boltstorm gauntlets in reserve, ready to come down turn 2 and hit the enemy with at least 60 strength 4 AP-1 bolt shots. We have a unit of 10 Vanguard veterans with Storm Shields and jump packs, 6 Storm Bolters and 4 Thunderhammers. They will aim to make use of the Infiltrator stratagem, so they should be able to get a first turn charge off on the enemy if we go first, and if not, we can either think about starting them on the board, moving them up into cover, and then going for a first turn charge after the enemy has had turn 1, hopefully unable to see them. Or there'd be nothing wrong with them putting into Deep Strike reserve and coming down, hopefully within Shrike's aura, to get the reroll to charge. In hindsight, I'm not actually sure if they can take Storm Bolters. Maybe ignore that bit, that was just a nice to have if they can, I believe not. Then for our back line, we have 3 units of Intercessors with bolt rifles. They will hold the fort back at home and hold home objectives. We've got 3 units of 3 Eliminators with bolt sniper rifles. They'll be absolutely horrendous enemy characters because they will be hitting on 2s, wounding on 2s against virtually everything. If the enemy has any knights running around with the character rule, then these guys also put out a very nasty amount of mortal wounds and wounds in general against knights. When they're in the tactical doctrine, these guys could be putting out around 10 wounds on a knight per turn until they're dealt with, so they're very, very nasty. We also have 3 units of 5 sniper scouts to either deploy in the midfield and screen your army from chargers and deep strikers and things, or they can just sit back with the rest of the army, enjoying the Raven Guard's benefit of being -1 to hit while they're sat in cover. And to finish off, we have a Phobos Librarian who will take the Umbrancy discipline and hopefully start up the board to buff those aggressors turn 1. He can also help deny enemy psychic powers and hopefully shield some units from Overwatch with the Umbrancy's psychic power that does this. And to fill out the battalion, I've also put in a lieutenant who can help give the backfield units reroll 1s to hit. Also not included on this list, but something I'd think about buying in, would be to give an Eliminator Sergeant Ex Tenebris and the possibility to soup up the Smash Captain either with a damage 4 Thunderhammer from Mastercrafted weapons, or we could give him the boosted jump pack Raven's Fury. The main criticism of this list I would have is that it doesn't have very much ranged anti-tank, but these snipers with all of their mortal wound damage output will be able to put a surprising amount of damage on hard targets once characters are removed. A possible variant of this list would be without Shrike and running it as a successor chapter. I would take the successor chapter traits that gives plus 3-inch range to my weapons, which will be very good on most of the weapons in this list, but particularly the Hurricane Bolters, Boltstorm Gauntlets and the Centurion's Flamers, while also helping out the backfield units quite well. I'd then take the Hungry for Battle rule, which gives all the units plus 1 to advance and charge, making the charges out of Deep Strike very reliable, particularly when combined with some of the other Raven Guard stratagems to reroll charges. So, all in all, I think that the Raven Guard are going to be a top-tier competitive army, and they're certainly another one to look out for. Your characters have never been less safe, I'm afraid to say. I can't wait to see what people are going to run with these guys, and I'm really looking forward to using my Assault Centurion bomb on the battlefield. I just need to buy them and paint them, that's all. In terms of countering Raven Guard, I would try and have units that can deploy further up the battlefield or move their turn 1. Particularly Space Marine Scouts, Nurglings, that kind of thing, could be extremely handy in stopping them from dropping units right next to you. If you do have first turn, then make sure their drop sites are as limited as possible. If you're using decent characters, you need to make sure that they're hidden out of line of sight wherever possible, or at least the enemy's sniper weapons are not all in range of all of your characters. If you're playing Knights, consider not buying in the additional Relics and Warlord traits, because even if they give you good buffs against the opponent in terms of shooting or damage output, then it's likely going to be countered by the fact that the entire freaking army is plus 1 to hit and wound against that knight. I'm really looking forward to seeing what we get next in terms of these supplements. Salamanders and Imperial Fists are great. I think that I'll be doing an Ultramarines review next, so feel free to subscribe if you'd like to see that. As I said earlier, I'll put a link to my review of Kayvan Shrike down in the description. So if you want to complete the tour of this codex, then feel free to check him out. Thank you for listening to Auspex Tactics, and may your enemies underestimate the Raven Guard nevermore.